Did the recordings help you? Yeah, and so with sociology, like I referenced, we group behavior. Let me see here. Bam. Hold on, I lost my frame of reference here. Let me see, share. We're gonna look at groupthink, specifically McDonaldization, for your essays this morning. Are you seeing this social groups and formal organizations here, Joe?
Yes.
Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, I see it.
Want me to put it bigger?
Yeah, if you could.
That better?
Definitely.
We've kind of talked about this a little bit with media socialization and what's happening now with social media and media saturated society. People, it's hard to tell when the algorithm stops and the person begins anymore in 21st century society, isn't it? A lot of what we see, take your YouTube feeds. I'm sure many of you will check out YouTube videos and things. Or when you're searching, a lot of it is just algorithms based on your specific behavior in the groups and the things you click on and things like that. So a lot of what you're seeing and what you're feeling, what you're thinking about is generated through this, right, artificial medium, isn't it? And a lot of it is just to get to you, the group that you identify with, and those things you value, the products you put around yourself, the people you surround yourself with. But when you look at groups and the importance of groups, they're very important to us, aren't they? As far as our self-esteem, how our character's molded, our feelings about ourselves, our personalities, and your friends. And we're very dependent individuals for a long time, and that's been since we've been living in caves, or even before that. We liked it to friends. It's when you're feeling down, or you're kind of depressed, or you've been knocked around a few times, which all of us have been. What's one of the best things? And you don't need the drugs. If you checked out Philip Zambrano's lecture, The Psychology of Evil, and he talks about that. But what does it engages those behaviors, and that creates a better mood, is connecting with others, right? That's one of the things that cognitive behavioral scientists and theorists would first thing they tell you. That was the biggest discovery, is like, if you're feeling down, the worst thing you to do is to isolate yourself and sit in your room and feel sorry for yourself, or woe is me, or be by yourself, but throw yourself on your friends, right? Throw yourself on your family. So it's huge, and it provides us a kind of an identity of how we see and view the world. So when you look at those primary groups, family and friends, what's sociological significant in the last 30 years is the secondary groups and work groups that we spend more and more time around. and those have multiplied. You know, if you think about, consider it a sociological experience. Someone Google how much time you spend, the average person, sitting in traffic, commuting to a job, or sitting at a stoplight because you're commuting to a job, or the amount of time you spent, at your workplace, as opposed to your kids and your family and your, in the house that you spend $100,000 for. Warren Buffett, famously, always says, when he's interviewed, he often will say, he's always lived 10 minutes from his office, because one thing he can buy anything he wants, right? But one thing he can't buy is time. If you've ever lived in the Chicago area, which I have, it's just, you sit on the Kennedy Expressway and the Dan. It's just constant to get to one place to another. Many people have to do that because of affordable housing, and to get to where the jobs are at. And of course, with the way, work, gig economy workers stringing together 3 and 4 time jobs and things like that. So that's having a negative effect in some regards on, familial structure and community within that small nuclear family. But that's very important, and it's kind of interesting. I think it was Joe, and when we left off last time, said, because a lot of, scholars have been talking about a big reset. And, some like Joe, we've referenced, it'll probably be a slight one, and the status quo will just kind of reorganizes themselves. But it'll be interesting in some of the things I've been reading on what, these owners of businesses, small and large, will do with their workers, because now they figured out what, Joe? Especially the ones that are working from home.
That they can, well, some can still maintain their business, but there's
they more of the professional class. They can maintain their business, but it's also more cost effective, right? So all these office parks and these office malls, that they pay rent to, and it's been known for a long time. You could do most of these jobs. There is a scholar by the name of David Graeber. He was at University of Chicago. He was at Princeton. He's at Oxford now. He wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs. Right? And found that the amount of time that people actually work, and do productive work, a lot of times, especially these large, we'll talk about Max Weber's bureaucracy, these large administrative staffs that you find in the health insurance industry, in corporate America, in schools, in public schools, as well as colleges, that a lot of the studies on this have found that people will work, maybe it takes them about 30 minutes to do their job, right? And so the rest of the day, they sit around, with their Facebook up, or they're, doodling something and pushing paper, returning an email here or there or whatever. So whether these people will kind of like use this as an opportunity, to my point, to peel off that huge administrative labor and have more people just work from home. I think some of the big tech companies are going all virtual. But anyway, side note. So in-group and out-group dynamic, we'll look at this with deviance and social control a little bit, and how we we bond and we bind back to groups, that we feel loyalty to, our family, our political orientations. You look at, um, once you look at governance, people would sit down, and have a drink at the end of the day, after slugging it out on the floors of the Senate and come to an agreement, right? Now you have what political scientists call negative partisanship, right? Where they won't even, negotiate with the other side, right? And you're seeing this in live time. The last, it really went back to the late 1990s, but it's exasperated now. You see this also who people who lean left or right, the way they get their news in their Twitter feeds and stuff like that, which leads to confirmation bias and groupthink, which we'll talk to in a minute. And where it's like the other side isn't someone that just has a different viewpoint from them, right? But the other side, someone who doesn't think, along the same lines politically, right, are to be not trusted or, disgusting or, bad or whatever, right? So you're seeing these antagonisms intensify with this. You also see that this is a big academic discussion with the rise of the internet and social media and bot factories and things like that. And this is, within academic circles that study foreign policy, and you've probably read about this, that what they do, especially between Russia, China, the United States, Great Britain, what these countries are able to do now is they're able to take, say, a polarizing issue, like it might be the Supreme Court, nominee, which is the latest, or the coronavirus, or Black Lives Matter, or something like income inequality, right? And so they're able to have these, these literally bot factories, create these, fake social media accounts, and to create a further fissure between in groups and out groups. So some of the times of what you're seeing, if you're a social media wonk, like a lot of people are, often that what you're seeing and following is, just something that was just created with an algorithm, by some factory in China or Russia or somewhere else to make it worse. Because the whole thing with, you ever studied CIA and all that type of stuff, is to diminish, another country's influence in the world, get the country turning more inward, get groups turning more inward. And this has to do with, at the micro level, as far as non-political, big national security issues. So that goes on, but big time intensified, and it's also intensified along, artificial intelligence and algorithms and things like that, to create further problems with this. And to get you to buy things that you don't necessarily need. So reference groups, this we look at this. That's not too important. We influence a lot of our behavior, how we dress and wear our hair and things like that. Popular culture, references, music. When a lot of kids, when you're growing up, when your ideas aren't fully formed and you kind of, you want to belong, a lot of times a reference group will influence how you act, how you, talk, how you, think in your worldviews. Now, social networking, things like this, when you're, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing this, Um, but consistently networking and building your what we call your resume, your CV. Um, the degree you get is about as worth as much as a piece of paper it's printed on, right? What is worth is that networking and that credential, right? What you did, on the side, So if you take Robin and you have a master's in business, but however you like worked at, um, you know, uh, the food bank, you volunteered, at, uh, Caris, whatever that for, you know, working with homeless people, you gave of yourself, you constantly, you were in student government, uh, what have you, that is what people will look for within that. And of course, as well, it's not who you know or what you know, it's who you know, isn't it? And probably many of you probably would raise your hand if I can see it, um, that you've gotten a job because you've known somebody. I'm 52 years old, and every job that paid me money, um, was because I knew somebody. Someone referenced, dropped my name or something, or gave me a name of somebody, and that type of stuff. So that's important. Some of them are hard to get into. What we used to call the old boy network. Um, Country club set type of thing. So now the more important parts of this chapter and this segment is on group conformity and group behavior. Check out the article I posted, McDonaldization, the Psychology of Evil. And then Irving Janis's article on groupthink, for added reading. It won't take that long. There's short articles, and the Psychology of Evil by Zambrano, who did the Stanford Prison Experiment, is about 20 minutes. It's a TED Talk. Now, obedience to authority is a lot more common than we think, right? A lot of times when people, the bystander effect, when you have these scandals, the scandals in the Catholic Church, the scandals, remember a few years back at Penn State, Michigan State, recently, a lot of people on the inside, knew a lot of this stuff that was going on that was really bad, that just did what? Walked away and didn't say anything. And the significance of that, when you look at the experiments that looked at how, and this is what Max Weber grappled with later in his academic career, was, especially in Germany, why do seemingly good people, very smart, right, the scientists, go along with the horrors of the Nazis, and that really obedience to a charismatic authority, like a Hitler type. A lot of the scientists went along with that. The people in the humanities and the social scientists and the philosophers were like, bad idea. And the ones that could get out, like Hannah Arendt, who wrote The Banality of Evil. She's a famous philosopher, scholar, and amongst others that got out. Saw that and it can happen very quickly. And so what Stanley Milgram wanted to do, after this, and, if you think of the world after World War II, much of Europe laid in ruins. They suffered 2 world wars. And, Japan was nuked a couple times. And people were concerned if, this rise of authoritarian type of um, governance could happen again. So what Stanley Milgram did is he took this electrical box, right, and he recruited people, to do his research. The first was on men, and so people would come in the room, and Milgram had a lab coat on and a clipboard, and he would ask the person to ask the guy behind the wall a question, and if the guy got it wrong, he would say, "Administer the shock." And the first shock was like sticking your, finger in the light, or a penny in the light socket, or shocking yourself with your lamp, a fray cord. And it went up to, could cause danger, could cause extreme danger, could, extremely dangerous, 440 volts, um, which Zambrano called the pornography of power. And so the guy behind the wall would, he would, when he would get with something wrong, and Milgram would say, "Administer the shock," and the guy behind, they'd shock him, and the guy behind the wall would be like, I got pains in my chest, can I get out of here? Can we stop this experiment? And the people participating in the research is like, "Hey doc, why don't you go and see if this guy's all right?" And Milgram's like, he's participating in this research. He agreed to do this. Go on and ask him another question. And they kept going up, and 2/3 of the people went up to the most dangerous voltage in the studies, in the first study, right, which was all men. What these people didn't know is the guy was part of Milgram's research team. He wasn't getting shocked. They thought they were shocking him. They went on to study. It was big news. People were like horrified by the findings of the study. Then they went on to test minorities, and they went on to test women. And they just a whole range of different groups. And they all tested, went to very extreme measures. And it kind of, solidified that, people will generally just will go along, instead of standing up, and saying this is wrong, and go to an authority figure or call the police. Things like rape, a lot of things go unreported, or things like that. So these studies extended beyond what Milgram did, and another study was on what we call group thinking. You've probably heard this term before. It's thrown around a lot these days. That it's basically the kind of a one-way tunnel vision, if you will, of how groups make decisions, based on their values and group cohesiveness. And and when people know it's unwise, but they will just go along when they know like something bad outcome could happen, as a result of it, say war or decisions in corporate America that anyone taking a business ethics course, you probably studied a lot of case studies, things like quality control and stuff like that. So Irving Janis studied a lot of like big blunders in U.S. history, and attributed to group conformity, where people on the inside knew that that was bad, could cause tens of thousands of deaths, like in Vietnam, and they just keep going along. Vietnam was a big one that Janis studied. The shuttle Discovery was one where they knew that the panels, they shouldn't have sent sent it up. They knew that was kind of iffy, and they were under a lot of pressure to get it up into space. That was in '86. And then I'm thinking of the BP oil spill, right? When those rigs blew, there was big findings. Is BP knew those rigs weren't up to code. Mining disasters, you see, I mean, just basic deaths as far as in workplaces or people getting um, exposed to harmful chemicals or a lot of mining disasters when those come up. Um, there was one a couple years back. 60 Minutes did a big investigation into it, but a lot of it is attributed to groupthink. Um, there's a huge body of evidence. When we went into that first Gulf War, I mean the second one after 9/11, that a lot of the weapons for mass destruction and all that type of stuff was not very credible, and they used that to push forward an agenda. Colin Powell even goes up to the United Nations and testifies, and it threw us into endless wars, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and a lot of sociologists say that's a lot of that is attributed to groupthink, where it's very hard, and you guys have known this. You've probably been in situations in workplaces, or in your day-to-day activities where you've kind of questioned, say a business decision or something in a workplace or what a business practice is doing, and a lot of people just shut up, because a lot of times people are worried about what?
Repercussions for themselves.
Yeah. You stand up, Joe, and say, this is wrong. I don't want my name tied to this, right? I'm going to go to somebody and, say Robin is your superior, boss. And they're like, look, you can do that, but guess what, Joe? We'll make sure, you never work, in this town again, or, in this industry. Happens all the time, especially in government, high level positions, where just people are afraid. And politics is a nasty profession. They will, throw you through the roofs. Same thing with corporate America, banking and things like that. In the 2000s, the FBI, a lot of their agents went to try and because of the war on terrorism and all that stuff, were repurposed to go after, hunting down, trying to find, sleeper cells in America, with domestic terrorism. And there was an epidemic of corporate crime, but basically white collar crime in America in the 2000s. It was started in the 90s, and a lot of the FBI agents were repurposed, and there were very few regulators on the white collar corporate crime, Wall Street and stuff like that. And a lot of it was kind of an out of control industry. And what had happened, and the bottom fell out, because of this. A lot of consensus on that in 2008 because of, an epidemic of white corporate crime. And, people were just basically going on. People are making money, the career. Pharmaceuticals are one. I put a frontline documentary on this one guy, I forget the company he was, that started the whole snowball effect of the opioids, with doctors prescribing them. They're just spending lavishly on, gifts to these doctors, and they're just pumping these, handing this stuff out, to kids that got, knee surgeries after, a football game. Oxycontin, very dangerous drugs. And it was an out of control industry. And, there wasn't a lot of whistleblowers, and the people that did stand up, takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? To say this is wrong, this is unwise, and I'm not going to do this. Young people are going to die, or what have you. So Max Weber's bureaucracy, the iron cage, sometimes it's called. You guys can relate to this. You're trying to get yourself away through school and working, things like that. Try talking to your bank, or try talking to your cell phone company, what have you, right? Max Weber wrote, and this will be the end of history and the end of man, that basically everything would be dominated by these bureaucratic, from government to religions to churches to businesses to schools, everything would be dominated by this efficiently managed formal structure, and that he identified these characteristics with a specific division of labor, right? Very specific written rules and written communications and records, assignments coming up from the large administrative staffs down to workers and people at the bottom of these organizational rungs. There's a dehumanizing effect. That's what Weber called the end of history, the end of man. Work for a lot of people can be a very dehumanizing force. You feel like kind of a cog in the system, a level of impersonality. You much of the time you're spent, doing the same thing over and over and over again, for 10 hours a day. You're dispendable. That the goal of the organization should always be, the bottom line, and that's something Weber was concerned with. The bottom line, of course, is, profits, right? That, personal feelings shouldn't interfere, for you as a person, shouldn't interfere with the goal of the organization. So then when they went and they gutted, and eliminated a lot of middle management jobs in America, there's actually, courses of how to do that, right? When they did this with, when they privatized, some school districts, or, when they closed the big rapid deindustrialization, especially in the Midwest, when these factories closed, going back after the NAFTA, agreement, and then when the World Trade Organization brought in China, jobs just went away. And then, it was always this kind of public relations smooth over. GM is a big part. It's always been a big part of this community, and so you had generations. So Weber, called this the rationalization of society, and it's not to say it's more rational. It's actually irrational, and contrary to human ability. And so he would say that capitalist societies predict to become increasingly dominated by this and operate like an iron cage, and the bars would get thicker and thicker and thicker. And everybody would be stuck in this, and you can't get around it. And they also would kind of, Tim Wu, scholar at Columbia, called the curse of bigness. These whatever a business model, type would be applied to everything. So whether it's medicine, whether it's schooling, whether it's, a trendy, store, they have the same, much of schooling is based on this type of model, with the mass standardization of testing and things like that. I mean, to some degree, um, that's works and that's good, but in a lot of the criticisms of it is this not. So, what a scholar by the name of George Ritzer took Max Weber's theories of rationalization, the bureaucracy, and applied it to lastly, with the Iron Cage, Weber was concerned big time of the 1984 Orwellian type of, as technology advanced, governments and surveillance being surveillance states, knowing everything, the Big Brother syndrome. That's been going on for a long time. That's nothing new. When the revelations of, not even revelation, I'm just going to use that word, but the Edward Snowden stuff and the Panama Papers and the WikiLeaks and some of that stuff, that was known. That was nothing new. Governments have done that stuff for years on ordinary citizens and things like that, and on other governments and stuff like that, interfering in elections. That's just common practice. So on and so forth. So back to George Ritzer's theory, I'm sorry, was based on Weber's theories. And he noticed that and began taking note with the spread of McDonald's, right? Bringing the factory to the back of the kitchen type of, uniformity, conformity, and cheapness reproduced, really throughout most of the world now, a la KFC, the fast food industry. That business model, if you will, is being reproduced and has all unintended consequences through other industries, and through other parts of the world. So whether it's, a Starbucks or a Walmart or an Amazon, they're dominated by these processes, that efficiency. There's a tyranny of efficiency. A lot of people want instant gratification, instant feedback, instant, they want that Amazon package now, comes in like, a day, and they'd love to have drones dropping it off there. Or, instant returning your, emails if it's, a text message. Calculability, that emphasis, that shift from quantity instead of quality, right? You found that throughout, much of these industries, especially with, places like Walmart and Starbucks. You get prepackaged type of syrups and stuff that come into these nice fresh sandwiches that they have set, in Starbucks, are shipped in from wherever and, frozen and put in the shelf. Predictability, the same products, customer service, customer behavior, employee settings, you go into a Target and it's pretty much going to be the same, isn't it? Walmart's the same. Starbucks is going to be the same. You're going to buy an overpriced cup of coffee. It's going to make you feel good that you maybe helped some poor, farmer in Africa, maybe raised his standard of living or something. And this type of, and then control from technologies, whether it's workers, right? Whether it's product, whether it's settings. Schooling is McDonaldized. It's very efficiency calculable. type of quantifiable, predictable settings. Mass testing, ensures everyone just regurgitates the same responses. It's put into, online classes. I think we just made the comment this about, memorizing all these facts for your A&P and your nursing classes, and you got to go regurgitate them. That's pretty much how schools function. Schools function kind of like, they treat the students like clerical workers, don't they? Right? They sit at the desk, you do this, when you're done, you shut up. When everybody else is done, maybe we can have some extra recess. And then here's your science, worksheet, and they cram as many students as they can into classrooms. Or how we get news and information, according to this Richard's theories, McDonald's. It's very short, bland, type of unanalytical, stories. So if you have Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, they're pretty much saying the same thing 24 hours a day, with a slight variance in ideology, but it's the same story reproduced over and over, until the public gets tired of it, and then they move on to something else. But it's the same, through these media cycles. The travel, the Club Med, the type of prepackaged tour. Yeah, we went to Mexico. Actually, you went. You were carted off with, on a plane, and they went into an airport, and you were shuttled to this private exclusive resort. The food was shipped in from Miami. You're kept in this, resort that was owned by some company in Spain or France or whatever. Prepackaged, settings. So it's this, continues and continues. This same model, if you will. So what Richter found, especially throughout the 90s and the 2000s, is it created these really prepackaged geographic settings, no matter where you went. If you've ever had the pleasure of traveling around the country a bunch, you'll see things, with slight variance as far as, when you go out west in the mountains and things like that, or the big cities with the skyscrapers and things. But you're pretty much going to see an assemblage of the same really things on each corner, aren't you? You're going to see a CVS and a Walgreens, on each corner, a Shell and a BP gas station, in close proximity. You're going to have, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's. You're going to have, of course, a McDonald's, a Burger King, Taco Bell, a KFC. You're going to have Walmart about every 4 miles. You're going to have a Starbucks about every 2 miles now. You're going to have, a Target, and what's left of shopping malls, like your Jefferson Point type of thing. And then you're going to have basically housing schemes, housing additions, then consumption sites that are basically the same thing, and placed at different sides of the town. And so now, these businesses are, and these big, large enterprises are, buying their competitors out, and, things like that. So maybe Weber was right. We'd be trapped in this iron cage and there's no getting out. Can you get around McDonaldization though? And have unique experiences, not bland, standard, sterile type of.
I think
You
you
think
can,
most
but you
people
got to get
like
out.
what's that?
I think you can, but you kind of got to get out of the fast lane of life.
Yeah. When you, in large part, people like predictable settings though, don't they? I especially now, and I bounce into Target to grab some things. like to know where everything is, because I'm not about to be spending a bunch of time with a complete group of strangers, right? During a pandemic. I know where I need to get, right? I can know grab a toy for my son or whatever. They like their coffee, right? The Starbucks in the morning, whatever. But yeah, you can go off the beaten path. There's tons of great, coffee shops that aren't Starbucks, that give you unique experiences. Fort Wayne has great ethnic restaurants, man, all down, Calhoun Street. Real authentic Mexican food, real authentic Italian, pretty much every, Vietnamese. Olive Garden isn't Italian food. I hate to break it to you guys. Go to the Italian Connection on Taylor. It looks like a hole in the wall mafia hangout. You walk in there, and there's empty wine bottles on the bar, and it's only open like for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The pasta's made from scratch. The guy will cook it. You can see into the kitchen, which is always a good thing. It's pretty cheap too, inexpensive. And then when you're done, he'll sing Sinatra songs to you and your date. While you're eating, you could bring in your own bottle of wine. But yeah, I mean, it is when you Fort Wayne, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Indianapolis. It's just endless consumption sites with this same type of, assemblage of settings, really. So, I mean, it kind of the significance of it, how we relate to one another. Now, Amazon is just blowing all that stuff out of the, isn't it? What they're doing with that. So, but it seems to be continuing. So I mean, you look at how we, make mansions and things like that. How we where we live, residential patterns. It's basically the houses are the same things. They're just kind of designed in a way. Questions on any of this stuff? I'll ask you about groupthink and McDonaldization for the essays on this. Check out an excerpt. There's a PDF of McDonaldization that gets into this more. But I would close, and that article on McDonaldization talks about this. There's a dehumanizing effect studies have found on individuals that work within these these businesses, that are McDonaldized like that. They're monitored consistently, right? Of what they're doing, how much, you take UPS or a FedEx drivers or factory workers or someone that works at Starbucks. It's just constant go, 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 go. With that, so check out some of that extra stuff. If you guys have any questions, shoot me an email on this. This is fun stuff to write on. I put up Any general questions for me?
I have a thought. I don't know if it's a question. Do you think places like Shipshewana benefit from, I'll say, mass consumption because that's how they make their living? Like, what do you think about places like Shipshewana rather than like Starbucks?
Yeah, I mean
you understand?
that's a unique experiment. That's not necessarily McDonald's, is it?
I don't know. That's what that's what I'm
That's
asking.
just yeah. I mean that's an old-fashioned, old-timey type of marketplace, isn't it? People just go there and assemble their goods, and a lot of it's made craftsmen and artisans, right?
But do you think it's becoming
Shopkeepers
larger?
or someone that was keeping their own bees and they have their own honey, or they bake their own. No, that's not McDonaldized.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, that would be an example of really kind of how things were before the corporate, because a lot of the McDonaldization, it's all corporate driven, isn't it? And when you look at the corporate ownership of those, who owns what? There's only like what CVS owns. CVS is a big one if you look into what CVS owns. But Shipshewana is a good example of off the beaten path type of consumerism that you can go and do, or to go to a farmer's market, which most towns have. But that wouldn't fall under Ritzer's McDonaldization. The McDonaldization stuff is more corporate, type of things, you know. Other questions? There's that media analysis paper is due. You can also make up your own assignment. That's due next week, right? That's an easy paper. You should really have a good grasp of Soch right now. We'll get into deviance and social control next week, and look at the war on drugs and addiction in American society. Any other questions? All right, well, you can go ahead and I'll post the recording up, tomorrow morning. Go ahead and you can start working on those questions, do that additional things. The psychology of evil, Zambrano, the guy that did the Stanford prison experiment, that article on McDonaldization, and then Janice's article on groupthink. All right, well, it looks like it's going to be a nice day. Hope you can enjoy it. It's been real. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email or stick around. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
See you, Robin.
See ya.
Thank
I
you.
have a question on the paper. I was looking at kind of like the outline and things. Normally the papers are like two spaces. Are we doing double spaced on those? It didn't mention on there, so I was just trying to.
Yeah, double space.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I see, Joe, you mentioned Bush and the weapons of mass destruction in the chat. You remember all that stuff.
Yeah, I lived through that.
That was quite a decade, wasn't it?
Yeah, and but the biggest thing I go back to on that, it was a believable possibility because at one time he did have weapons of mass destruction. He had used chemical weapons against the Kurds and killed thousands of them. So the idea of him trying to develop a nuclear program was completely believable. And given enough time, maybe he would have.
Yeah. Yeah, and boy, I tell you that the after the mess in the Middle East, man, was just all thrown open after that, man. Sadly, Syria, you know, bear a lot of the brunt of that, when they debaptized the Iraqi government and all those, and they opened the jails, and those guys all went and into Syria and Iraq and other parts of Iran. Sad.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot more tribal there now than what it was before. They were kind of like living under the mafia. I mean, it wasn't exactly a safe place to live, but I mean, it just kind of went from bad to worse.
Yeah, and once they, boy, in the Middle East, when you look at the most, you look Syria, for example. Christians, Jews, Muslims, they all lived together, man. There was never, you talk to Syrians, it was pretty cool. I mean, the government was authoritarian, but, other than that, that people mind their own business. It's like, what government isn't, it did some bad stuff, and mind you. But, for the most part, people coexisted, man. There's, extreme tribalism, but, they didn't really have this kind of in-group, out-group type of thing. They respected each other's religion. The call to prayer would go off, and people would go pray, and, Christians would walk by and, say salam alaikum or whatever, right? But yeah, after the Iraq invasion, boy, that just splintered all those groups. Of course, and then there's all these weapons, left, left over. So, but the arms trade, oh man, over there, as you know, is big money, especially Saudi Arabia. That's under, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know what it is under the current administration, but the Saudis, which is an extremely authoritarian society, I think in the last 4 years, in the last administration, they sold them like $10 billion worth of arms. Sadly, I mean, people over there, they're killing, the thing in Yemen, a lot of them are American, made, missiles and things like that. Wow. Yeah, but it's terrible what's happened over there. It's still a mess. So. Did you serve, Joe, at all when you're younger? Or your
I
kids?
joined the Army Reserve for 3 years, and they wanted to, I was in the military police, and they wanted to rebrand us to prison guards. And I got out because that wasn't at all what I wanted to do. And I probably would have been one of those that would have been sent to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.